Alright, so the Philadelphia Eagles just had the perfect start to NFL free agency as they finally made the move that we've all been waiting for and re-signed arguably the best player on their defense last season in linebacker Zack Baun. And the details are pretty interesting, so I'm going to break it all down in this video today, as well as what it'll mean for this Eagles defense. Plus, perhaps the best part is that the Birds are not done making moves yet, as there's still some other massive dominoes yet to fall as we're getting closer and closer to free agency. So we're going to dive into all that in addition to all the other latest Eagles news starting right now. NFL free agency is just a few days away, and if you know anything about the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman, it's that no matter their cap situation, no matter what their roster looks like, they're never going to stay silent, and they're always going to be looking to make moves to make their roster better so that they have the best shot possible to win, especially now that we're in this window where they have a chance to win maybe multiple Super Bowls in these next few years. And I think, early in this offseason, just before free agency, I think we could all sense that something big was coming, just because over these past several days, the Birds and Howie Roseman have already made some pretty big moves. I mean, first on Monday, they went out and released star cornerback Darius Slay, which, was definitely a tough pill to swallow, as Slay was fantastic last season, and he's obviously been a staple of this Eagles defense for many years, but it was a move that was necessary to create some cap space, specifically $4.3 million. And then the following morning, they released another former All-Pro cornerback in James Bradbury, this time creating $2.1 million in cap space. And then the big shocker of the past several days was when they extended Saquon Barkley to a record contract, making him the highest paid running back in NFL history, specifically with the deal extending him for 2 more years and being worth $41 million. And while obviously the timing of the move was a little surprising, just considering the fact that, he's being extended just 1 year into a 3-year contract that he literally just signed last offseason, it not only was very well deserved after the season that Barkley just had, but the timing of it was also no coincidence, just considering that this was yet another move that freed up more cap space for Philly ahead of free agency, as again, it was looking more and more like something big could be coming for Philly. And it was speculated by many, including myself, that this next big move that the Eagles were gearing up for was to re-sign linebacker Zack Baun, who I think we all thought was going to be their #1 priority heading into free agency, and get him wrapped up before the legal tampering period even opens up on Monday. And now, as of Wednesday afternoon, it's official and Zack Baun is back in Philly, as Adam Schefter reported, quote, "Breaking, the Eagles are re-signing All-Pro linebacker Zack Baun to a 3-year, $51 million contract, including $34 million guaranteed at signing, and an additional $1.5 million in incentives and escalators per sources. The contract instantly makes Baun one of the highest paid linebackers in the NFL." And now, obviously, there's a lot to break down and talk about with this move, but I feel like I just got to start out by saying congratulations to Zack Baun, and what a story he is. I mean, going from playing 4 years with the Saints and being nothing more than a rotational edge defender and also a special teamer, to then signing with the Eagles last offseason on just a 1-year, $3.5 million prove-it deal, to then, during the offseason, working his way up the ranks, becoming a starter by the start of the season, and then absolutely breaking out and becoming probably the best linebacker in football last year. Like, it's actually insane. I mean, the numbers he put up were crazy, as he had 151 tackles, 69 stops, which led the NFL, 3.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and he was also the best linebacker in coverage in the entire NFL last season, as he allowed just 5 yards per target, which ranked first among linebackers, and by a pretty wide margin too. And that's also not even mentioning the fact that Baun, surprisingly, was the 2nd highest graded defender in coverage in the entire league last season as well. I mean, that's pretty insane for a linebacker, and on top of that, obviously, he was a Pro Bowler, he was a first-team All-Pro, and he capped it off by becoming a Super Bowl champion. And now, Baun gets a very well-deserved new contract worth $17 million per season over the next 3 years, which makes him the 4th highest paid linebacker in all of football, just behind guys like Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, and Tremaine Edmonds. So, again, shout out to him. I couldn't be happier for him, and as an Eagles fan, I'm just so excited to have the Bald Eagle back in Philly for years to come. And I'm sure the Eagles are pretty freaking excited too, just considering that, 1, they're finally going to have some consistency at the linebacker position after so many years of subpar play and just turnover at that spot. I mean, think about it. The last linebacker that they had signed to a long-term contract was Nigel Bradham, who signed a 5-year deal but only played 2 of those years. And then probably the next guy after Bradham would be TJ Edwards, but he obviously wasn't here for very long either, as after he had established himself as a good player, he left for the Chicago Bears in free agency in the 2023 NFL offseason. So So to finally have a difference maker at the linebacker position, let alone one of the best linebackers in all of football wrapped up for the long term, is just amazing, and it's going to make the Eagles defense so much better. I mean, we saw just how much of a difference he was able to make in his first season with the Birds in Vic Fangio's defense, as he was arguably their best player and their biggest difference maker all season long. So given more years, more time in the system, more time to develop chemistry with his teammates and just get more comfortable, I feel like he's only going to get better, which is crazy to even think about just because of how insane he was this year. And that's not even considering the fact that there's a pretty good chance that Baun ends up becoming a leader for this defense next year and moving into the future. I mean, again, obviously he's one of their best players, but also he seems to be a pretty vocal guy, a guy who's loved by his teammates. And I think towards the end of the season when Nakobe Dean went down, I think you kind of even there started to see Baun take on a little bit more of a leadership role than he had in the past. I mean, just listen to him here talking to the team right before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's been a long ass week, but a busy week, but we got a lot of downtime, so use my downtime kind of reflecting on when I first got here. And I took it upon myself to really dive into the team, to really embrace you guys and let you guys bring me in. So I just appreciate that. I love y'all. And we play our best ball when we're together, so let's fly around, communicate, and do what we do.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't say anything crazy there, but I just feel like for Baun to be one of the few players up there in front of his teammates talking before the Super Bowl just shows you that the potential is definitely there for him to become a great leader in the future, and it also just shows you, what the guys in the locker room really think about him. Like, his teammates clearly respect him, they clearly like him, and they definitely embraced him this season, so having a guy like that locked up for years to come again is definitely valuable. And overall, again, I mean, I just really could not be any happier with this move. I mean, bringing back Zack Baun was the #1 thing that I wanted the Eagles to do this offseason. I mean, they could have lost all their other free agents, but as long as they got Zack Baun back, I was going to be happy. So again, just super thrilled that they actually got it done. I'm also super happy for Baun that he's getting compensated like he deserves, and I think it's about as close to a perfect start to the Eagles offseason that we could have had. But obviously, that said, the Eagles are not even close to done making moves, and the big question now is, well, what's next? Well, for starters, one thing that they got to do, like I talked about in my last video, is figure out what they're going to do with tight end Dallas Goedert, as obviously, he's a little bit on the older side now as he's 30, set to turn 31 next season, and this is typically around the time, maybe even earlier in this, when the Eagles decide to start moving off their tight ends. Plus, he's also in the last year of his contract, and he has a solid $12 million cap hit this coming season. So some people have suggested maybe trading him this offseason. Personally, I don't really want that, just considering how valuable he is to the Eagles offense, both in the pass and run games, and I'd rather see them restructure or preferably do a short-term extension with Goedert for maybe the next 2 seasons, as that would save $4.3 million in cap space and allow them even more room to make other moves. And then moving on, you got a guy like Lane Johnson, who there's no chance that the Eagles are going to move on from him, but some people have thrown around that maybe he's a guy that could be extended or restructured as well to save some money. And that would make sense, as he's got 2 years left on his deal, and he's got pretty big cap hits in each of those seasons. So, redoing that deal in some way to lower the cap hit, like how he always finds a way to do, would definitely make a lot of sense. And then you also got the pending extension to Cam Jurgens, which I feel like there's absolutely no way that the Eagles don't get that done this offseason, just because we know how highly they value offensive linemen, and Cam was just awesome last year in his first year as the starting center, taking over for Jason Kelce as he made the Pro Bowl, and he quickly became one of the top players at that position in the entire league. So there's no doubt that the Eagles are going to award him with a big contract extension soon as well, especially since that is yet another move that would free up even more cap space this year. So again, I feel like it's only a matter of time before that happens. And then in addition to that, you also got to figure out what you're going to do with Jordan Davis. He's yet another guy who you can maybe extend this offseason to free up some cap space, or you could pick up his 5th-year option, which I kind of feel like is more likely. However, $12 million is a pretty hefty price to pay for a guy who, he's really good, and I think what he does for this team is really underrated. But I don't know, $12 million might be a little bit of an overpay for a guy who has a very specific role and who doesn't even play half the snaps per game. So, he's another interesting one. We'll have to see what the Eagles do with him. And then on top of that, I've actually seen some people even talking about, maybe there's a possibility that the Eagles could look to redo the contract to Jalen Hurts and extend him early, which obviously, that would be a pretty surprising move since he's locked up through the 2028 season. But, we all just saw what they did with Saquon Barkley, extending him early as well. So who knows, maybe in an effort to save even more cap space, they could do do something a little similar with Jalen as well. And obviously, yes, I just went through a whole lot there, but basically the point I'm making is that there is still a lot of moves that the Eagles could make to free up even more cap space, which would give them even more flexibility heading into free agency. And while honestly, I don't expect them to make a bunch of huge moves or splash signings like they maybe did last year, there's still a lot that they could do, and there's a lot of players that they could sign who maybe aren't, huge superstars, but they could come in and be consistent contributors to this Eagles team next year. So again, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I'm definitely excited because Howie's got something up his sleeve. And who knows, maybe that something could be somehow re-signing Darius Slay, as like I mentioned in my last video, he just cannot rule that out just yet, considering that there are reports out there saying that both Slay and the Eagles do want to come to a resolution to keep Slay in Philly for his final season in 2025. That said, after winning a Super Bowl, Slay's probably looking to get paid some big money, and what he said on a recent appearance of FS1's The Facility only confirms that to me.
The money's equal, everything is equal. Where does Darius Slay want to play next year?
Philly, for sure. It could be whatever. You know what I'm saying? As long as the money nice. If Philly doing what I want to do, we in Philly again.
I don't know. I mean, I really don't want to read too much into anything, but from that, it definitely seems like, at least to me, it sounds like he's trying to get paid. But it's also positive that he is saying that Philly is the place that he wants to be. So the question then is, how much would Slay be willing to come down from his initial asking price to stay? Because we know the Eagles just cannot pay him as much as some of these other teams can afford to. So we'll just have to wait and see. And something else we're waiting on is Brandon Graham's retirement decision. As just days ahead of free agency, the 36-year-old edge rusher still has not announced whether he's coming back to play or not. Now, I'd have to imagine that news will come out very soon, but some other news actually did come out regarding BG very recently from reporter Derek Gunn, being that the Eagles legend actually re-tore his tricep during Super Bowl 59. And I mean, all I can say is, what a warrior, what a legend this guy is. I mean, go back to their first Super Bowl victory, and he's the guy that obviously made the big-time heroic game-winning play, strip-sacking Tom Brady. And then fast forward to their second Super Bowl win, and he makes a miraculous comeback from a serious injury, plays through it, re-injures himself, yet he still contributes to the winning effort. It's just crazy. I mean, man, you gotta love BG. Shout out to him. He's no doubt a Philly legend forever. And whenever BG's retirement decision does come out, you guys already know that I'm going to be covering that, just as well as all the other news throughout this entire offseason for the Eagles. So if you don't want to miss any of that, then make sure you subscribe, and also really, really importantly, turn on notifications so you're notified instantly when I upload a video or I go live. I've gone live a couple times now in the past few weeks, and I'm trying to do it more. So again, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. And also leave a like down below just to show some support, because it really does help me out a ton, and it takes 2 seconds. See if we can get to at least 600 likes on this video. And also leave a comment down below just regarding anything that I talked about in this video. What are your thoughts on the Zack Baun extension? I'd love to hear it down in the comments below. And also, if you want to watch another Eagles video, you can check this one out right here. And now with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.